Welcome to the Iteration Point. I'm Michael Atkins. If you've been in the workforce long enough, you know that careers rarely move in straight lines. Sometimes the pivot is intentional. You decide to learn something new and shift directions, and sometimes the pivot gets forced on you. Today's guest is Erik Cathcart, and his story illustrates both. Erik started as a fine artist, shifted into design because, as he puts it, being a fine artist doesn't really pay very often. From there, he moved into marketing and then product development and eventually became an IT director. Along the way, he picked up an MFA, worked with solar startups, built databases with millions of data points, and collaborated with organizations like Berkeley Labs and the U.S. Army. And then last year, federal funding got pulled. Erik found himself navigating what he calls a really horrible job market, trying to figure out what comes next after 13 years with people he genuinely loved working with. This conversation is about versatility, about losing the team that made the work meaningful, and about being selective at this stage of life, choosing what's compelling rather than just what's available. Let's jump in. I'm really super psyched to talk with you today, Erik. Love to introduce you to our audience and give you a chance to introduce yourself and talk about your journey, where you're at, and kind of where you're looking to go in the future.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'm great to be on this. I'm psyched that you started this. So I started my career off, my professional career in design, which was sort of a natural direction coming out of being an artist, because being a fine artist doesn't really pay very often. So I sort of fell into design by accident and then worked in that for quite a few years, but eventually hit a wall where I say the joke is, but it's really not a joke, that I was tired of the CEO or the CEO's wife or the CEO's uncle telling me what colors were the best colors for something. God forbid that I had 2 years of color theory in college. I ended up in Burlington, Vermont, working for a medical software company and was the creative director there. And I worked underneath the marketing director, who was a great guy. This guy, George, lived up in the Northeast Kingdom there. And I said to him, I'm like, what if I want to shift my career into marketing? Will you kind of train me? And he's like, absolutely, for sure. So he mentored me for like a year and a half. And then I made the shift professionally and moved into marketing, and then did that, for 15 years or so, I guess. In the middle of that, I went back to grad school and got an MFA, and which I still did marketing while I was in grad school for the art museum there, Samuel Gorski. So yeah, I went to SUNY New Paltz in the Hudson Valley for my grad school. So it was good, keep the continuity. And then, I came out and
it seems like a very parallel kind of skill set that you need to be able to, work in marketing and really, having an eye for design really complement each other.
Yeah, I felt that way. I also picked up when I was at the software company, very early days, but they sent me to several conferences when, the internet was the new thing and people were playing around with all these great tools and it was going to solve humanity like we're hearing now with AI. But the good thing about that is I learned UI and UX design and went to some courses because they were a software company. And so that was kind of a great skill set that I pulled out of my pocket again later in a future job. So yeah, I came out, I did some work with startups for a while where I did both, market planning and analysis. And then I also helped them write business plans, or I might have told them that like there is no market for this particular cool idea, but no one's going to buy it, and there were a couple of those. There was a guy that wanted to recycle coal into a denser carbon footprint. And this was like when, green, everything was just starting to take off and renewables. And I was like, it's a cool idea, but no one's going to buy it. It just has the wrong frame, right? So I did that for a couple, 2-3 years. I worked with various things. And then with one guy, I was working with one sort of guy who was leading these startups. So he and I were sort of a team. And then he came across a solar startup out of Vancouver, BC, Canada. And so we got that off the ground and I ran the marketing and he ran, he was the CEO. And that went well until the technology did not prove out. So the theory there was they were going to make solar cells without using exotic metals, which is a big deal. Most do. And they had a great idea, but once you scale it up, a lot of times it fails. So they start at like a, I don't know, not a micron level, but maybe 10 microns. And by the time they get to like the size of a solar cell, it's still got to be doing what it's doing. And often it doesn't for whatever
Right.
reason.
This is that efficiency or whatever those
Exactly. Yeah. Its
type.
efficiency drops way off and there's issues. And so, and right about that same time, the Chinese went gangbusters on traditional silicon. And
Right.
so
Flooded the
the
market.
market for any new wave stuff in the States crashed. So they
Mhm.
imploded and I ended up being on the market again. And I was living in Portland by then. So that's how I wound up at Earth Advantage. I was looking for work, ended up interviewing there for their head of marketing. And that's where I worked for, I did marketing there until just about 2022. And then I shifted into IT. And in the middle of all that, as you're very familiar, we sold a software product that you were involved with in managing called Cake
Yeah.
Systems. And then there was a project that came to us from the city of Portland to build what's called the Green Building Registry, which is a huge database and software application for the real estate industry to find if a home has
Yeah.
green value,
I was there when we kicked it off.
Right.
Yep.
So I sort of volunteered to take over what you were doing, although I was shadowing you a bit to start with, and then did that in conjunction with marketing for a long time. But what happened is we just got a lot more product work. And so it became owner
Going
impossible.
0 to 1 on a product like that
Yeah.
takes a tremendous amount of time and resources and engagement with stakeholders, and yeah, it was a lot of, it was a great vision, and I think the product is out there now and being very effective,
Yeah.
right?
It's no, I think
So
there's almost 4 million data points in the database,
fantastic.
which is
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Something really to be proud of.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
and, then we did work which you had started with Berkeley Lab, and they kinda came back year over year. We signed a master contract with them, and I worked on several projects, various tools, redoing tools, etcetera. Final product I worked on was, a building performance database for the United States Army. That was pretty interesting because they have a lot of buildings.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Huge.
we sort of made an organizational decision that it made sense for me to not do 2 jobs anymore, and the marketing lift was much lighter by then. This is in the term that I was there, we went from enormous amounts of print material, right, and events and all
Yeah,
types of things like traditional marketing pieces to everything was digital,
all
everything was
told.
online, all the training was online for the most part, no in-person classes, there's still few, but and so the whole shift changed, and our shift in our approach to gaining new clients really became just going to conferences and getting our name known. And so that's not really, what most places have to do, which is social media and so forth. So
Mhm.
organizationally, we decided to move me full time into product development and actually become the first IT director there and manage all the internal software platforms, our online servers for our products, for our SaaS products, which at that time we were on Amazon. And I eventually moved us to Microsoft Azure. And that was it. And then hit a wall with the federal government last year where they suddenly pulled the plug on over $1 million in funding. And so the organization had to make some hard decisions and let 2 of the directors, myself being one of them, go. And I entered a really horrible job market.
I mean, I think we're seeing that is still happening, right? We're seeing more and more people being let go. Layoffs are continuing. It's definitely a very crowded marketplace for people that have a lot of experience, right? Across a lot of
Yep.
different verticals and areas of focus that are out looking for their next opportunity right now. So
Right.
as you're in that position, and a good way into your career, what's that been like in that job search and kind of
Mhm.
exploration phase that you're in? What's that been like for you?
Pretty miserable, really. I mean, to be honest,
Yeah,
in a lot of different ways.
sure.
You know, as the last time I had looked for a job was over 13, at this point, 14 years ago. And the way you got a job back then, as you know, was very different than the way that it's happening now. There was no real AI screening of anything. There was no, I mean, AI was around, but it wasn't around like it is now. And there wasn't such a thing as being ghosted. It was very rare for a company to not follow up in an email and say, sorry, we're not going to do it, but thanks for applying. Also, just what you described, the job market. with what you and I do, product development, management stuff, the market was pretty flooded with all these people getting laid off from the big ones, Meta, Amazon, et cetera. That compiled on top of it with, my very nonlinear career, which made it very difficult for recruiters, I think, you know, AI especially, to understand where I fit in. And so that made it a rough go. And I think by the time I figured that out, it was kind of almost too late. I was in so deep and so committed to the particular pathway. And had I known, I would have pivoted earlier and looked at different things that I'm doing now, different opportunities and changes and take advantage of that. But you don't know.
Well, and it's never too late to pivot, right?
Right.
And
Totally. Yeah.
I completely hear where you're coming from. When you have been doing something for long enough, the inclination, I think, is to keep doing that thing,
Yeah.
right?
100%. Yeah.
And and I think what I'm seeing in the industry and you know, in the readings that I'm doing and conversations that I'm having is that's not enough anymore, right?
No.
Like we all have to figure out how to do something slightly different in a different way or to a different audience or leveraging more of our backgrounds in order to stay relevant because of that AI influence that's out there. It feels like there's a perception anyway, right? And I don't know how real
Yeah.
this is, but that AI can do the things that, you know, a specific job might be tailored for. But I think the human experience is so much richer and broader than that and has so much more value that can bring and perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we have those experiences to lean on that kind of guide us in different ways. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I know that certainly several of the tech CEOs are placing all their bets on AI and they're already cutting thousands of jobs. Whether that'll hold up or not, I'm very skeptical. I think they're going to regret doing that in the long run. I don't think it's going to pan out the way they think it is. It's almost become a religion to some people there. I don't know if you've read Karen Ho's book, The Empire of AI, but I highly recommend it to anybody. It is a massive eye opener about what these executives really think. They don't like democracy, for instance, and kind of the illusion of what's being propped up now with a lot of marketing and other things. And Karen worked for MIT Press for a long time, so she's a real insider. The book is extraordinarily well written. She goes deep into the roots and how things started and how things broke off, how Amodei left OpenAI and went and formed Anthropic and so forth. So you get the history as well as kind of, I guess you'd call it politics of what's going on out there now. But that being said, I mean, in general, I guess having survived, like I said, the explosion of the internet 1.0 and going to these conferences where everybody was doing very cool things, but talking about how it was just going to cure cancer, be the new library and all these things that were, and I drank a little bit of that Kool-Aid at the time. And then that just imploded, because it's ridiculous. And also because I think it became a corporatized entity, That's why you go to a website now and they all look the same. They pretty much
Yeah.
all look the same.
Right.
There's
Right.
no more
The internet
experiment.
the internet has empowered a lot of things,
That's
right?
true.
That
Yeah.
didn't exist before,
Yeah.
but it's really been a force multiplier for existing business systems in a lot of
Yes.
ways, right? There are
Yes.
new industries and there are new capabilities, but I think, yeah, that implosion that happened in 2001, right?
Yeah. Slash two. Yeah.
Yeah, right, like,
Yeah.
that whole dynamic, it feels like it might be repeating itself a little bit in terms of expectation being set incredibly high for replacing everything that somebody does is
Yeah.
probably not necessarily real, right? AI might be a really good tool to use to help, you know, further advance, the efficiency of people that are doing work, but it still requires people to do the work and people that
Right.
have that
And there's a certain specificity right now with what it does well. It's great with biochemistry. Claude Code is really excellent to getting small apps launched fast. I guess going back to the idea of this Internet 1.0 concept, it has made me very suspect of brand new shiny things and they're going to solve everyone's problems because they rarely do. And I feel like there's a lot of ethical concerns that I have with AI that are different, very different than Internet 1.0. Much like I was very suspicious of Bitcoin and those currencies when they came out. And, ultimately they end up, you know, funding some pretty awful things around the world and making some pretty awful people rich. So I'm at a point where, there may be some opportunities that open up and sort of everyone wants you to have an understanding of AI and use case. And I definitely put my toes in the water with that and explored it. There's
It's important to
certainly
stay
safety
curious,
concerns.
right? Yeah.
What's that?
It's important to stay curious and to
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 I'm not just saying obviously I'm not a Luddite. I'm not like, oh,
That's right. Yeah.
let's break the machines. And, like we already discussed, there are some applications where I think it's going to be really tremendous. I think it could do some really tremendous things. It just bothers me that it's so quickly being used to replace human beings in the workplace right now. And there's been a few studies that have come out already that have said, they've had to hire people to go and check the work of what it's messing up. I think it's cool to experiment with it to a point. I think there's some companies like Anthropic that I feel are so far being pretty ethical. You can see their recent response to the US government. And then today, OpenAI stepped in and said, oh, we'll take over. We'll do what they want us to. And so, that kind of stuff really bothers me. It's really, and I think everybody should be bothered by it.
And I think I'm seeing the impact of that, at least in my feeds as well, right?
Mhm.
And people leaning into Anthropic for that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and, I think Emodai has a pretty good, he and his sister have a pretty good head on their shoulders so far. They're not out there saying it's going to fix everything. They want to retain human, interaction. Hopefully they'll stick to that. If you recall in the day,
Human
Google
in the loop.
said, do no evil. And then they got rid of that. And I'm not saying they're evil, but certainly they're not necessarily the most ethical place on the map right now. So yeah, I don't know. And I guess I've just reached a certain age where I'm like, it's time to look at other things. It's,
Right.
maybe
The
I don't
world
have
of
to do the same damn thing.
opportunities are out there, right? And how there's so many opportunities that each of us have over the course of our lives, and we can't fulfill all of those. So when you pivot and you go down a different route, you're really just fulfilling more of your potential. And it's not a failing in any way when you're taking a different track and you're looking at new opportunities and maybe switching careers and doing something that you've always wanted to do but never had the opportunity to before, right? Or changing it in a slightly different way, tackling a problem that you see that's out there, or expressing yourself creatively in a different way, right? Like there's so many different opportunities that you have from your background as an artist, and with somebody in that background in marketing, and as well as in management in the nonprofit space, right? You kind of have a background in all of these things. So, following any one of them or even something else new entirely, certainly well within your capabilities.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that I've realized recently, it's rough to stare at a computer screen for 9 hours a day. I started getting an eye issue and I thought there was something wrong with my eye. And I went to the eye doctor and he's like, no, you just got eye strain.
Right.
And he goes, from staring at the computer so long. And I do have the blue lenses even and stuff, but it's, as you get older, I think it starts to wear your eyes down and kind of drain you physically, even though you're really just using your mind for the most part. So that's kind of something I've been thinking about as well, like doing work where I don't have to stare at the computer all day long for 8 hours a day or more. Something that mixes it up a bit would be more interesting to me. And I think in an ideal world, I would love to get back in the art space somehow. Talk about tough to find a job, and they don't pay that great either. But
But what a fulfilling job that would be.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things I did in this very varied career was when I came out of graduate school, rather than teach, I started looking to work in the art world, and I took on a role as a curator at this small art space in Stowe, Vermont. It was called the Helen Day then. I think it's called the Current now. And that was amazing. I loved that job. That was probably the best job I ever had in my life. I got to pick artists that I liked. Proximity to New York City gave me a huge breadth of people who were like willing to come up and hang out in Vermont, and show their work up there and meet people. I had a really great board at that center because a lot of wealthy people buy homes in Stowe, either to ski or go up there in the summer. And they came from a very, rich backgrounds. They were very cultured people. So that was great to work with those people too. Just, I got sidetracked by family issues and ended up diverting and that, life happens. So
Those pivot points, at that point, something else made sense. to
Yeah.
pursue.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. I've sort of come to a realization in the last month that, much to what you were saying is there's a lot of things I can do and being more selective about what I really want to do and what's interesting and compelling at this stage in my life and where I can contribute meaningfully and ethically to things without feeling I have to compromise on those, ideas. That's kind of ideal. And obviously working with great people. That's probably the biggest thing I miss right now.
It
Is
really is, right?
yeah.
Like, when you
Yeah.
know you're surrounded by a team of people that are all trying their best to, make the world a better place in some fashion.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredibly motivating.
Yeah, they're just tremendous people at Earth Advantage. They're just really great, great human beings across the board. And it was a joy every day to work with them. It was a joy to work with the developers I worked with who were in their own separate companies as well. They were also really unique, special people, and I miss working with them as well. But life changes. Like you said, you pivot, you figure it out.
It does, yeah. But I think there's an element there that's worth kind of diving into just a little bit, which is that human connection that you get from working with other people on a day-to-day basis, which I don't know what this has been like for you, but all of a sudden when that's gone, right? There's a certain amount of, that human connection that's you're not being fulfilled by, right? And we have friends outside of work and all of those
Sure.
things, but it hits differently
It
when you know
does.
you're all working toward a common goal.
Yeah, I think, working with team and I had the pleasure of working across multiple different types of teams there. When I was in the marketing side of things, of course, I worked with every team. Then even when I went into the tech side more, I was still working with a lot of different teams because they wanted a particular product or they needed, a software solution. Right before I left, I vetted and helped us to find a new ERP to replace our QuickBooks smart, accounting system because we had grown so much. We needed something much more sophisticated and helpful. And that was really, you know, I'm working with our accountant every day to talk to her about things. And I normally wouldn't talk to her that often. So it was great to do that kind of stuff and be able to move around and, work with different teams. And yeah, that was probably the hardest thing about leaving there is, saying goodbye to those people and not really interacting with them on maybe not a daily basis. Some of them I only saw once a month, but, still had a long history with some of them, some I had,
Yeah,
when I started, they were there. I worked with them for 13 years. So it's a
right.
long time to work with someone.
Yeah, that's right.
You build up a real relationship. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, that's definitely tough. And probably the biggest sense of loss when you do leave a job is that
Yeah.
if you have a good team, I mean, obviously if you're uncomfortable with the people you work with, then it's a positive. Oh, great. I don't have to deal with that anymore. But
Right.
I was very fortunate. And as you know personally, having worked there as well, that, the people at Earth Event are just the best. They're really incredible human beings.
I know that wherever you end up working with the next team, they'll be very fortunate to have you, Eric.
Thanks, Mike.
If people hear this and want to get in touch and with opportunities that might align with where you're interested in heading, how would they reach out to you?
Best way is probably through LinkedIn still.
Okay,
My contact information is there and they can find me that way. That's probably the easiest.
cool. We'll put links
So
in show
yeah.
notes.
Yeah. So we'll see what unfolds in the next couple of months as I move in this new direction. I don't know. Maybe I'll move in an old direction. We'll see, Michael.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it
Things will
sounds
come
like you're
around.
you're open to a lot of different opportunities and
Yeah, I'm
kind of
fairly open to
things.
it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I've got some irons in the fire with different things right now. So, I'm sort of just seeing what comes out of it. And I think the openness has also helped me to be less needy and wanton, which is always a better space to be in when you're looking for a job. So you don't just take any old job, right? And wind up someplace that maybe you're unhappy. So I'm actually pretty excited about what's going on now and what's happening.
So Eric's still figuring out what's next, but he's approaching it with openness rather than desperation, which, as he mentioned, is a much better space to be in when you're looking for work. If you're interested in connecting with Eric about opportunities in marketing, product development, IT leadership, or anything in between, the best way to reach him is through LinkedIn, and we'll put a link in the show notes. One thing that really stood out to me in this conversation was when Eric talked about the biggest sense of loss Leaving a job isn't the title or even the work itself, it's the people. When you've worked alongside someone for 13 years, building something meaningful together, that's what you miss. It's a good reminder that the teams we work with matter as much as the work we're doing. Thanks for listening to The Iteration Point. New episodes drop every Tuesday. If this resonated with you, hit follow and share it with someone navigating their own transition. And if you have a story about pivoting, planned or unplanned, visit theiterationpoint.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'm Michael Atkins. See you next time.